Hey everyone, I'm NZ, and today I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be doing a PvP tier list for the New World weapons in the current patch, which is 1.1.1. As someone who's experienced in PvP for New World, I will be listing this obviously based on my experience with the game and how they interact. I have currently used every single weapon in this tier list quite a bit, other than Void Gauntlet, which I have a little bit of experience with, but it is quite a new weapon, so I'll try my best on that one. Okay, so let's start it off with the Ice Gauntlet. I'm going to chuck the Ice Gauntlet straight in B tier just for being average. After the last patch, it got hit very hard after it's nerfed with ultimate, pretty much making it so you can only stun someone for once every 5 seconds when you've got the ultimate chill on them, which is a massive nerf and definitely brought it down from what I would have considered being A to even S tier control. Okay, so the next one on the list is Rapier. I am also going to chuck this in B tier. And the reason for me chucking this in B tier is it's just useless in wars still. There's no place really for the Rapier in wars. If you're talking 1v1s, then this would be an S tier weapon. It is very hard to use and requires a lot of skill to do that, but yeah, it scales down very quickly. I would say it's like an S tier weapon 1v1, 3v3 it's like an A tier, anything higher it's a B tier. It just becomes utterly useless the more people you throw into a PvP situation, which is the issue with it right now, even though it does the highest single target damage in the game, like damage per second wise. So the next is Axe, and this should be somewhere between A and S tier. I'm actually going to put it in S tier just for the simple fact of it is the easiest weapon to use in PvP in New World, for 3 reasons really. The first reason is Defy Death is just broken, so it's a 75 second cooldown with a 3 second invulnerability when you get low. So you pretty much get out of free jail card every time you mess up in PvP. So, and this is up every single time you do wars or anything. The only reason it's not like double S tier is because it doesn't have the range of some of the weapons, but it is pretty cracked. It is very easy to use. You get out a free jail card, and it does a lot of damage. The only thing it does a little less damage than is really the Rapier when it comes to single target DPS. It is absolutely cracked as a weapon, so yeah, it's in the S tier. The next weapon I'm going to go over is the Musket. The Musket's going to go straight into A tier, and the reason I'm putting it in A tier is it is a very skillful weapon to begin with, but it has incredibly high damage opportunity, and in the right hands can literally turn a war if you know how to focus properly. The only issues with the Musket, like I said, is it's a really skillful weapon. You need to be in light armor with 5 constitution, like a 300 dex or int build with the rest of the stats in the other, and be far away from everyone else. If you get hit once by or probably like twice by a great axe, you're dead. Like you'll have like 6k HP, you'll be in light armor, so you'll take like 4k hit damage wise. But the damage output of this weapon is very high, and it is a lot easier to hit than a bow. So yeah, I would say Musket's definitely an A tier weapon. It could be an S tier in the right hands, but I'm just going to say it's A tier just because of the difficulty of it. But the damage output is definitely amazing, and it is a lot easier to use than say bow. So where does this place bow then? Okay, this might be the first one, and this is coming from someone who's actually a bow main. So the weapons I've used the most in New World is actually bow and spear, and then it'll be sword and shield. But I'm actually going to put bow in C tier, and some people might be thinking, okay, that's a bit freaking harsh in it. The reason I say bows in C tier is it can do the same amount of damage as a musket, especially with AoE with poison shot, which is easy to hit, and rain of arrows. The problem is with the bow is it is incredibly hard to finish anyone. There's no hit scanning like on the musket. The drop off is ridiculous. You need to line up, you still need to space. The skill gap between the bow and the musket, I would say for finishing people off is immensely different. Like the musket's hard, the bow's pretty much impossible against a good PvPer, to be honest. Like it is very hard. The other abilities, I would say the bow is easier on, like poison shot and rain arrows, but like penetrating shot, splinter, all those other ones, a lot harder. So normally when I run bow, I run rain of arrows, poison shot for the AoEs, and then I just run penetrating to try and finish people off or do mass amount of damages in AoE, which you would have seen about 4 videos back. I'll put it in up the top of this one, so you can see that as well. I call it my War Commander build, but it does a lot of damage. It does have a pretty high skill cap though, and that's with heavy armor, not light. If you're running a bow musket light armor build, that is ridiculously hard, especially for the bow side. Okay, so let's get into Spear for PvP. Spear would be in a Z tier right now. It's going in the D because we're only going down to D tier, but Spear is absolutely useless right now in PvP, and this is something incredibly sad for me to say, as I love the Spear, but the problem with the Spear isn't the damage, it's the desync on the abilities. So Spear is the weapon that suffers the most from desyncing in wars or PvP in general. If you don't know what desyncing is pretty much when you hit an ability, right? The ability won't land, or the ability will hit them, but it won't do the effect that it should. So what happens with it is you go in Vault Kick, which is an ability that does damage and should stun the opponent when you hit them. And you'll do the damage, but they'll just run away. Or you'll do a sweep, and you'll hit them, and it doesn't knock them down, even though they're not gritted. The Spear is incredibly desyncy, and it doesn't really work very well just because of that. Like, the damage and, like, idea behind it is great, but it just doesn't work at the moment. They need to fix some of the sync issues with it. Maybe, like, change some of the timings on the abilities so they land a bit easier for it to be PvP viable. It is by far the worst weapon on this whole entire tier list for PvP right now. It's great for PvE and can actually deal more damage than practically anything done other than a rapier if you have the right setup build for it. I have a guide on that as well, my bow and spear guide for PvE. So you can check that out as well. You can hit like 6.5k crits very easily with the spear if you have the right build for it. But that's only for PvE. It's a setup weapon. It doesn't work for PvP, and that's just because you don't get to set it up. Okay, the Fire Staff. The Fire Staff at the moment, I'm actually just going to chuck this in. Before it was an S tier weapon, to be honest, it's somewhere between A and B tier, and I'm just going to put it in A tier. The only reason I'm putting it in A tier is because the damage you can do in a wars AoE is still quite easy to pull off. I would put it in B tier in a 1v1 or like a small scale PvP situation, but that's only because, like, when you've got people paying attention to you, your skills are a lot harder to hit. Like, they can be dodged out of a lot, but when you're on a point, right, and everyone's like just standing there blocking or not moving, you can get a ton of damage output from this. It would be an S tier, but after the last patch, they nerfed the Fire Staff quite heavily, especially the Fireball, making it not able to crit. Definitely reducing the damage of the Fire Staff quite heavily, unfortunately. Okay, so let's go into the Life Staff. The Life Staff's going in as a solid S tier. And the reason it's still an S tier is because with the last patch, they did nerf it, and it was probably a double S tier, but now it still hasn't been nerfed enough. It's still a bit overpowered, and the reason for this is if you go full light armor, you're healing thousands of health, right? But the problem really isn't light armor, because in wars, you can just, if you've got a good gank squad, like, you can just one-shot them. The problem is the Paladin build, which is where you go heavy armor, you go either like a sword and shield or a hammer, and you go mostly constitution with a bit of focus, right? So these people with like say 100 to 200 focus are healing a ridiculous amount of health. It's not as much as the light armor guys, but they're still healing enough, and they just don't die. You literally need like 2 heavy full spec'd PvPers with like Great Axe Warhammer to CC them and one-shot them at the moment to kill them. Otherwise they don't die. They never die. So that's why it's in the S tier. It's still probably leaning in between the S and the double S tier here, the Life Staff. It is still incredibly overpowered. Okay, so the sword and shield. I'm actually going to put the sword and shield in the A tier. This one here might be a bit discussed about just because a lot of people think the sword and shield's not that great. I'm going to give you two sides to this. So I'm a DPS sword and shield player, so I do a DPS bow and sword and a sword and hammer build. And there's a really strong buff that people just don't use enough called leadership, which gives you 10% bonus damage to you and everyone in your party when you're using sword and shield. This here is absolutely insane and is very undervalued, as well as the Swordmaster side of the abilities actually do quite a lot of damage. It's nowhere near as much as, say, a rapier or an axe or a great axe or a hammer, but it's still very strong. And it's good, reliable damage that's easy to hit. As for the tank side of the sword and shield, it is definitely obviously the best tank build at the moment and is very, very strong. The only reason I wouldn't put it in S tier is it is still easy enough to break with the current meta of, you know, Warhammer and Great Axe, where they can practically two-shot a block and yeah, you just get beaten up still, right? But the weapon itself's still pretty strong. It's not weak by any means, it's pretty easy to use. The hardest thing about a sword and shield isn't exactly the ability usage, in my opinion. It would be the equipment you have on you. To make sword and shield viable, you really need good equipment. That's the main requirement for sword and shield. Like, leaping strike's easy to use. Shield bash is incredibly easy to use. Shield rush is incredibly easy to use. Defiant stance requires a bit of knowledge of when to use it. And then you've got whirling blade and reverse stab. Reverse stab would probably be the hardest one to use here, just because it's easy to miss if you don't know what you're doing. But the actual weapon itself's quite easy to use still in general, just requires a decent amount of equipment. Okay, we've got the fated last three. We have the Warhammer, the Void Gauntlet, and the Great Axe. I'm actually going to do the Void Gauntlet first here, and just, look, I'm not 100% sure on this one. I haven't used it enough for the Void Gauntlet. I'm just going to be real with you. I feel like from what I've used and what I've seen, it's going to go straight in the A tier. And the reason for this, it's got a lot of debuff and rends, and it feels very nice. I'm not going to say this is 100% tested for the Void. I haven't used it enough to really justify what I'm saying here for it, so take it with a grain of salt, but it feels good. I don't think it feels OP, but it definitely feels good. So I'm going to put it in the A tier for just above average. Like, it's strong, it feels strong. The rend is definitely hits hard as well, especially the melee form. So I would put it in A tier. And for the last two, we have the Great Axe and the Warhammer. Okay, so let's go over to the Warhammer. The Warhammer is a double S tier, and the reason for this is it is incredibly broken, the most broken weapon in the game at this current point. You might be thinking, no Trip, the Great Axe is more OP than this, but the Warhammer is more broken in general just because of one thing, and that thing is you don't need any strength to make this weapon hit hard, and the usability of it is still there. Why do we have a weapon in this game that has so much CC, more than any other weapon in the game? You have Clear Out, you have Armor Breaker for damage, you have Shockwave and Path of Destiny for some of the best CC in the game, and it still hits like a truck, right? You can literally have 50 strength and like 350 con, and you will hit harder with the Warhammer than any other weapon, by far. It's ridiculous. Like, you can build like an intelligence tank build and still use the Warhammer, and it still does decent damage. Like, it's ridiculous. You have so much CC with the weapon, and you can just hit like a truck no matter what. The scaling, the base damage versus the scaling of it is, like, the scaling's not as good as the Great Axe, but the thing is, you can use it with practically any build. No matter what you're doing, you can pick it up in any build and just use it. It does its job no matter what. The Great Axe, however, is also going in double S tier, and the reason for this is just the damage is absolutely absurd. You can take a full tank from 13k HP, or say even more, down to 0 instantly, if you know what you're doing. If you crit and you hit everything, you will insta them. Like, I've got a video I will link as well in the description so you can check it out on how to play against Warhammer and Great Axe that I just made yesterday. as well as a video of the day before where I absolutely got pummeled by a great axe and showing you how much damage potential it has. The weapon itself, I would say, is the second easiest weapon in the game to be good with as well, which doesn't help the cause of it. But pretty much the great axe does too much damage, too easy. It does it in a very fast succession. It's got a lot of auto cancels. What an auto cancel is when you, like, say, auto attack with a weapon, like you use a normal heavy attack or light, you can use a skill to automatically cancel that animation to go into it. So a lot of people, when they're breaking a block with the great axe, they'll go up to you, heavy attack you with the great axe, and then charge into you. As soon as it connects, it does another heavy attack. So literally you get 2 heavy attacks instantly. And by doing that, you stun the opponent, and then you can lead into other things which practically insta-give them. So yeah, the great axe is very, very overpowered right now. It's not as OP as the Warhammer just because you still need to have the right itemization and skill spec for it, but it is way easier to pull off as well. Like, the Warhammer still requires a bit of knowledge of how to stun, when to stun, where the great axe you can kind of just left click auto spam or just abuse the abilities and just run in there and do it. I would say the only skill that requires a bit of knowledge to use well would be Maelstrom and Gravity Well together, like when to use each of those, because Gravity Well has like a 30-second cooldown, and Maelstrom's your main assassinating ability. If you mess those up, you're practically losing all your kill potential other than, hey, I left click spam. So yeah. So guys, that's the video today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you agree with me or disagree, please put down in the comments what you guys think, what you think is the, if I'm right on this, if I'm wrong on this. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, as I will be creating more New World content like this. I also stream over at twitch.tv/TripwireNZ, so you can catch me over there as well. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, night, wherever you all are. Peace out.